Hello and welcome to another edition of Windsor Teaches Ancient History. This episode we're going to be discussing the Achaemenid kings, that is Cyrus, Cambyses II, Darius and Xerxes, in terms of their interactions with other peoples during their reigns. Let's start off with Cyrus the Great. Now, I believe this story has some interesting and striking parallels with the Romulus and Remus origin story as well. Xenophon presents Cyrus's grandfather Astyages as a very kindly old gentleman who cares deeply about his grandson Cyrus. However, what we are told is that Astyages one night has a dream that his grandson Cyrus will usurp him. As a result, he hands off the infant Cyrus to his advisor Harpagus, who hands him off to a cowherd who is unnamed and his wife Kaino. From there, in his early childhood, he gets into a row with some noble children. It causes such a fuss that he is eventually pulled up in front of King Astyages himself. After a brief chat and the noble bearing of Cyrus, even as a child, it becomes clear of Cyrus's true identity. Cyrus is sent back to be given a noble Persian child's upbringing. However, the advisor who was tasked with getting rid of Cyrus is invited to Astyages' house for dinner. He is served a stew in which his own son has been chopped up and cooked. Harpagus is suitably incensed by this, and he begins lobbying with the Median nobles to rebel against Astyages' rule and help Cyrus take over the empire and the kingdom. And this is exactly what happens. Supposedly on the battlefield, the Median nobles change teams mid-battle and rout Astyages while joining Cyrus. This is also one of the first and most telling moments of how Cyrus interacts with other peoples. Supposedly, according to some accounts, Astyages is kept on as one of Cyrus's advisors. Also, Harpagus, the man responsible for having Cyrus killed, has shown his loyalty and is kept on as a loyal advisor to Cyrus as well. This shows that although facing adversity, Cyrus is more than capable of mercy and clemency towards conquered peoples. Cyrus has now had a true rags to riches story, starting out as the adoptive son of a cowherd and rising to meteoric fame after his tussle with Persian noble boys, and also having defeated Astyages and getting the kingdom of Media under his belt as well. You could easily argue that due to Cyrus's humble birth, he has a greater idea as to how to deal with normal working class people better than other kings who might have been born into the lap of luxury. However, it's also at this point that Cyrus attracts the attention of Croesus, the king of Lydia, which is in modern western Turkey. Croesus was suitably incensed over the defeat of his ally Astyages, and Astyages was his brother-in-law as well, as he married his sister off for an alliance. According to the accounts, Croesus was exorbitantly wealthy. He is credited with creating one of the world's first coinage currencies, giving rise to the simile rich as Croesus. It is also in this episode of history that Harpagus, Cyrus's old advisor, really shows his worth. The Lydian cavalry was famed the world over at this point, and it's Harpagus who decides that it would be shrewd and beneficial for the Persians to use camels on their front line when confronting the Lydian cavalry. The logic was that the Lydian cavalry had never seen camels before, and they were so perturbed by the sight and smell of them that they were scattered in the middle of the battle, giving an easy win to Cyrus and the Persians. Upon the capture of Croesus, Cyrus orders that he is put atop a pyre and that he should be burned to death. However, there's a deus ex machina situation that goes on here. As the fire is about to be lit, rains come in from the sky, which Cyrus takes as a warning from the god Apollo. The rain puts out the fire, and Cyrus gets Croesus down from the funeral pyre and takes him on again as his advisor. At this point, we see once again that although Cyrus is capable and he is so far conquered 2 new territories, he is able to show mercy and clemency to the conquered people that he now rules over. But Cyrus's campaign of expansion still continues. Next, after the conquest of Lydia and the merciful treatment of the king Croesus and the people in Lydia, not only this, but the Medians as well, and the merciful treatment of Astyages, Cyrus sets his sights on Babylon, which is around here in the Middle East, Central Asia area. In order to take this city, Cyrus realized that the defenses of Babylon were impenetrable, and so he comes up with a plan. He decides to reroute and drain the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, which allows him easy access into the city. All he and his soldiers have to do is walk along the now empty riverbank and into the city and take it. It's at this point where Cyrus puts in place a master strike when it comes to propaganda. He has the Cyrus cylinder commissioned. Many people these days will say that the Cyrus cylinder is a modern charter of human rights. This is, of course, anachronistic. We always run into problems when modern historians put modern concepts onto ancient history. However, what we do get from the Cyrus cylinder is a masterstroke of propaganda. Cyrus puts into place an account of the way that he conquers Babylon. He speaks of himself very, very positively, all the while disparaging the previous king of Babylon, the tyrant Nabonidus. On it, he also speaks of his merciful treatment of the previously enslaved Jewish people. He releases the enslaved Jewish people and sends them back to their place of origin. He also helps them to rebuild the Grand Temple in Jerusalem that had been sacked and from which gold and silver had been stolen. He also not only releases Jewish people, but sends them back to their place of origin with the previously pilfered gold and silver that had been stolen by Nabonidus, the tyrant king of Babylon. He is so famed by the Jews at this point that he gets a mention in the Old Testament, where he is exalted for his treatment of the Jewish people. What we see at this point is that Cyrus is the archetypal just ruler of conquered peoples. He is almost the blueprint that future kings will use to assess their own success and their own value as Persian kings. Despite his incredible success, Cyrus now also turns his attention to new lands, not occupied lands, but new lands, in particular in Central Asia here, which would have been the territory of the Scythians, specifically a tribe called Massagetae, ruled by a strong female ruler, Tomyris. Tomyris sent word to Cyrus a number of times asking him to cease and desist and that the Persians and the Massagetae should just leave each other alone. Cyrus refuses this request, and for the first time in his rule, we begin to get a picture of him as not necessarily a just and virtuous ruler as he had shown us in previous instances with the Lydians, the Babylonians, and the Medians. In a battle, Cyrus and the Persians take Tomyris' son hostage, who then commits suicide in captivity. Tomyris then presses another attack, and according to one story, she captures and kills Cyrus, beheads him, and puts his head into a bag filled with blood, when she makes some sort of quip about him finally satisfying his need for bloodshed. Another version of the story, however, indicates that Cyrus died peacefully in his newly built capital of Pasargadae. Thank you, and please tune in for the next episode where we will discuss Cambyses II and his relationship with his subjects and interactions with other people.